We live in an era obsessed with corporate optimization, but there is a glaring paradox at the center of most efficiency drives. Look at this quote from a recent case study. If you pay people for doing dumb stuff, they will get really smart at it. Making a flawed process faster doesn't actually help the customer. It just scales the flaw. Traditional customer experience management usually tries to fix this by relying on sentiment surveys. You send an email a week after a transaction and ask a user to rate their feeling on a scale of 1 to 10. But by the time that data comes back, it's a lagging indicator. It completely ignores the real-time structural decay happening inside the operation itself. To accurately measure an experience, we have to stop looking inside out at our internal efficiency metrics. Instead, we have to adopt a hard science outside-in framework that maps exactly what the customer actually goes through. Because if you strip away friction for your internal teams without looking at the external outcome, you end up with an enterprise that is highly efficient at failing the customer. The alternative to soft, subjective surveys is a strict mathematical framework. We need structural, operational metrics that quantify the unvarnished reality of a process as it happens. This list shows the 21 standard measures required to properly baseline a moment of truth. We are tracking specific variables like process elasticity, conformance, and output ratios. It is a dense, comprehensive set of data points designed to leave no operational blind spots. Among these 21 variables, the disruption factor serves as the primary indicator for systemic stability. It quantifies the level of structural chaos within a workflow. This score indicates whether a process can remain stable as it scales, or if the underlying friction will cause the operation to seize. Moving away from subjective feeling and locking on to these objective structural realities is the only reliable way to predict and prevent systemic operational failure. This is the outside-in dashboard, the central tool required to map and manage these 21 measures. We'll start by looking at the far left columns, identifying the specific point of failure, the description, the type, and the owner. The bedrock of this entire scientific approach is identifying the exact moment of truth, or MOT, strictly from the customer's perspective. Here, we see specific actions like complete application and confirm final acceptance. For every single MOT, we must assign a specific interaction type and a definitive operational owner, like the registrar or marketing department. Accountability has to be localized. Without pinpointing that exact moment of truth and immediately tying it to an accountable owner, any subsequent metric analysis you perform is completely useless. Once the MOT is defined and owned, we must quantify the internal friction required to execute it. We do this using relationship ratios. Look at the handovers, labeled HO, and business rules, labeled BR. These act as the primary units of process friction. Some MOTs execute cleanly with 0 handovers, while others require bouncing between multiple departments and rule sets. These friction units combine to create the proactive reactive index, or PRI. This mathematical breakdown shows how process inputs directly translate into index scores. By calculating the specific ratios of handovers and business rules, we generate a raw multiplier that yields a precise output, such as a 29.4 PRI score. That mathematically derived friction score flows right back into the master management tool, populating the pro-reactive column for each specific moment of truth. A highly reactive score mathematically guarantees customer friction. It is a structural inevitability, completely independent of how hard your employees are working to process the transaction. Structural friction creates vulnerability. Therefore, it is mandatory to measure the exact cost incurred if a specific moment of truth fails. This text outlines the dual nature of operational failure. A breakdown damages the client's objective, but it also damages the enterprise's bottom line through direct loss of sales, reduced revenue, or failure to meet strict compliance requirements. We calculate this by plotting the severity of the impact to the customer on one axis against the impact to the company on the other. This generates a unified risk score. That score is then locked into the daily operational view. We place the precise numbers directly into the risk impact column of the dashboard. Risk is no longer an abstract fear discussed in board meetings. It is a hard, trackable number assigned to every individual step of the customer journey. To see the true health of the enterprise, we must take these calculated PRI and risk impact scores and plot them together on a macroscopic scale. This chart displays the full SEM method disruption factor continuum, giving us the overarching spectrum of operational health. On the left side, low friction and low risk keep a process safely operating in the ideal or optimized zones. But when high reactivity and high risk scores combine, they push the process past the 600 mark, dragging operations straight into uncontrolled chaos and ultimately the death spiral. The operational death spiral is not an accident of the market. It is the inevitable, mathematical, and highly predictable destination of unmeasured processes. Shifting our focus to the final emotional outcome delivered to the customer, tracked across columns 14 through 17, the 4 E's. Notice these numerical ratings for emotion. We do not gather these figures by asking the customer how they feel after the fact. The core of this methodology is that the emotion is a direct output of the math. The underlying structural metrics, the handovers, the business rules, the friction indexes, mathematically dictate the emotional outcome. You do not survey for positive emotion. You must engineer the underlying process to guarantee it. Traditional inside-out thinking fails because increasing internal processing speed often just accelerates a flawed customer journey. Managing these specific internal levers moves the process away from subjective guesswork and toward a meticulously engineered, highly repeatable result. Measuring the experience through this framework aligns the customer's emotional outcome with the organization's operational data. It replaces the soft art of sentiment surveys with the technical discipline of process engineering.